I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now. Put your phone down. No, actually, keep it up because what I'm about to tell you is something I have never said out loud. Not to my best friend, not to my therapist, not to my mother who thinks she knows every chapter of my life. Not even to the man this story is about, not in these exact words, not laid out like this, not with all the pieces assembled the way I'm about to assemble them for you. Because there are some truths that take years to understand and even longer to say. This is one of them. It started with a razor. A simple, orange-handled disposable razor, the kind you find in any gas station for $3, the kind you'd use once and throw away and never think about again. Ordinary, cheap, completely unremarkable. And it ended with me sitting on a cold bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, tears streaming silently down my face, my whole chest cracked wide open, realizing, really, truly realizing for the first time that in 31 years of being alive, I had never once allowed another human being to fully see me. Not the real me, not the one underneath the performance, underneath the armor, underneath all the walls I had spent my entire life carefully constructing and reinforcing and defending. Not until that night. Not until Marcus held out his hand in the dark. This is the story of the night I shaved Marcus Webb's body hair and what he did in the quiet of that small bathroom that completely changed the shape of my life. That cracked me open in the best possible way. That made me understand, finally, what it means to be known by another person and to let yourself be known. Stay with me because this one matters. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 31 years old, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, I work in marketing, and I have been gay for every single one of those 31 years. Even the ones when I didn't have the language for it, even the years when I was 8 or 9 or 10 years old lying in my childhood bedroom in Macon, staring at the ceiling in the dark, feeling something I couldn't name yet. I grew up in a small city in middle Georgia. Church on Sundays, football on Fridays, a father who coached Little League and deaconed at our Baptist church and had very clear ideas about what kind of man his son was going to be. A mother who sang soprano in the choir and made the best sweet potato pie in 3 counties and loved me with a fierceness that sometimes felt like a wall all its own. A little sister named Naomi who was loud and brilliant and had, from approximately birth, absolutely no tolerance for pretense of any kind. It was a good childhood in many of the ways that matter. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling. My parents worked hard. Our house was full of food and music and extended family passing through. I had a best friend named Caleb who lived 2 streets over and we rode bikes together every summer until we were too old to think bikes were cool, and then we just walked everywhere instead. I loved Caleb, not in the way I understood yet, not with the vocabulary I would eventually find, but in the way where every afternoon I hoped he'd call and ask if I wanted to come over. In the way where when he laughed at something I said, it felt like I had won something important. In the way where on the last night of summer before 7th grade, we were lying in his backyard looking at stars, and I felt something so enormous in my chest I didn't know what to do with it. I did what I had already instinctively learned to do with things that felt too big and too dangerous. I folded them up small and put them away somewhere deep. My town, my church, my family, not one of them had given me a model for what I was. No one talked about it. No one used the words. When there were boys at school who were suspected of it, the reaction ranged from polite discomfort to outright cruelty, and I was a smart boy, a perceptive boy, the kind of boy who watches and absorbs and understands what the world is showing him. The world was showing me, that is dangerous, hide it. So I hid. I hid it with the fluency of someone who has no other option. By the time I was 13, I had constructed a version of myself so convincing, so well-rehearsed, that it occasionally convinced even me. I crushed on girls the way I thought you were supposed to. I talked about them the way the other boys talked about them. I played along with the locker room conversations and the crude jokes and the constant referendum of the 7th grade hallway, and I was good at it. I was so good at it. At 14, I kissed a girl named Tasha behind the bleachers at a basketball game. She kissed me back and I felt nothing, not repulsed, not cold, just a vast, echoing emptiness where something was supposed to be. I went home and lay in my bed in the dark and thought, see, you're fine, you're normal, there's nothing wrong with you, and I almost believed it. I played football because my father wanted me to, and because it was armor, the most respected, most legible armor a black boy in a southern town could wear. 3 years of it, I wasn't bad. I was decent enough to be useful, never good enough to be noticed, and I was relieved by that, relieved not to stand out, to be one of the boys, to belong to something that smelled like sweat and grass and unmistakable boyness, and to let that belonging speak for me. Inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I developed an elaborate interior life. I read voraciously anything I could get my hands on. I discovered that inside books there was room for everything. Inside books no one had to perform, I found other gay characters buried in subtext, in hints, in side stories that the narrative never quite committed to, and I recognized myself in them with a recognition so sharp it hurt. They were me, and I was them. And we all hid together inside books, and inside the stories we told ourselves about what was normal and what was okay, and what we were allowed to want. I took Brittany Washington to junior prom. She was funny and kind and wore a yellow dress, and she held my arm like she was proud to be there, and I liked her genuinely as a person, and I felt absolutely nothing romantic about her whatsoever. I smiled for every photograph. I held her hand on the dance floor. I did everything right. Afterward, her friends told her I was the perfect gentleman. I absolutely was, and every second of it felt like breathing underwater. When I got into the University of Georgia on a partial scholarship, I thought now things will be different. I'll be in a new place with new people who don't know me, and maybe there I'll be able to be something more honest. And then I got there and discovered that the walls I had built were portable, that I carried them with me everywhere I went, that no new geography was going to undo the architecture I had constructed inside myself, because the architecture wasn't about the town or the church or the specific people, it was about me. It was built in me, the way muscle memory is built in you, through years of practice, through thousands of repetitions, until it became automatic and unconscious and indistinguishable from self. I declared business as my major because it was practical. I made friends. I went to parties. I was well liked in the diffuse, low-investment way of a person who knows how to be charming in good company while revealing almost nothing of substance. I kept dating women for the first year, not lying to them exactly, but not being honest either, coasting on the inertia of a habit I didn't know how to break. The first 2 years of college I was drowning. I don't mean that dramatically, I mean it factually. I was underwater every day, performing a version of myself so inconsistent with what was actually true that the dissonance of it was physically exhausting. I slept too much. I ate too much sometimes and not enough other times. I would look at my face in the mirror in my dorm bathroom some mornings and barely recognize the person looking back. Not because he looked different, but because he looked so carefully, so impeccably arranged, and I knew what was underneath the arrangement, and the gap between the two felt infinite. It wasn't until I was 21 that I finally said the words out loud. Not to anyone else, just to myself. Just in my car, a beat-up 2007 Honda Accord parked in the lot of a Walmart at 11:45 at night, having driven there for no particular reason except that I needed to not be in the dorm, needed to not be surrounded by people, needed somehow to be alone with myself in a way that felt safe. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off. The parking lot lights glowed orange above me. A man pushed a cart back to the corral 20 feet away and got in his truck and drove off, and then the lot was empty and quiet. And I said out loud, into the specific private silence of a car at midnight, I'm gay. 2 words, the 2 most terrifying and true words I had ever spoken in my life. They hung there in the dark, they stayed, they didn't evaporate or prove themselves wrong, they just were. And something happened in my chest that I still struggle to describe, like a vault door swinging open, like a window being broken to let air into a room that has been sealed shut for years. It hurt, the opening hurt, the way any long compression hurts when the pressure is released. But underneath the pain was something that was undeniably, unmistakably relief. I cried in that parking lot for half an hour. Hard, ugly, gasping crying, the kind that surprises your own body, the kind that comes from somewhere you didn't know you'd been holding. I cried for the 8-year-old boy who didn't have words, for the 14-year-old who kissed Tasha and felt nothing, for the teenager on the football field performing the wrong life with enough commitment to make it believable, for every year of practice at not being myself. Then I drove back to campus. I didn't tell anyone, not yet, but something had shifted quietly and irrevocably in the private landscape of myself. It took 2 more years before I came out to other people. My roommate Nick took me out for pizza afterward and said, "Dude, I figured. You're like the least excited I've ever seen anyone be about girls." My best friend Simone cried from what she described as relief that I finally trusted her. My sister Naomi, when I called her on a Sunday evening, was quiet for about 4 seconds and then said, "Daniel, we all knew. I've been waiting for this call for literally 3 years." My mother listened for 20 minutes and said she needed some time and hung up and didn't call back for 4 days. And when she did, she said, "I love you," twice in a conversation where she usually said it once, and I understood what she was trying to say. My father stopped calling for 6 months. 6 months of silence that had weight and shape and texture. When he finally called on my birthday, it was brief and careful, but he called and he told me happy birthday, and I understood that it was his version of holding out his hand. But here is the part that no one tells you, the part that coming out stories often leave out, because the coming out itself is such a clear dramatic moment that everything after it gets treated like resolution. Coming out doesn't heal you. Coming out is a beginning, not an ending. And what it begins is often much harder than the coming out itself, because now you have to figure out who you actually are once you stop performing who you're not. I had spent so many years being someone other than myself that I didn't actually know who myself was. I had walls inside walls, defenses built on top of defenses, habits of performance so deeply ingrained I couldn't separate them from personality anymore. I knew how to be likable and charming and good company. I didn't know how to be known. I dated men now. Technically, I went on dates, I had relationships, I even had a few that were genuinely good with men I genuinely liked and respected. But I had a pattern I couldn't seem to break. Things would get to the point where someone was starting to actually see me, not the performance, but the actual complicated underneath of me, and something would seize in my chest, and I would start pulling back, getting cold, finding reasons the relationship wasn't working. Picking fights over nothing. I would end it cleanly and with enough justification that I could tell myself it was the right decision. I ended 4 relationships in my mid to late 20s, none lasting longer than 8 months, and after each one I told myself I was simply someone who was better alone. My therapist, a calm and direct woman named Dr. Weston, called it avoidant attachment style. She drew an actual diagram once on her notepad showing the pattern: person gets close, Daniel creates distance, person retreats or Daniel ends it, Daniel feels relief followed by loneliness, Daniel seeks connection again. What are you afraid of? She asked. When someone gets close, what is the specific fear? I sat with that for longer than I expected. That they'll see me, I finally said, all the way through and decide I'm not enough. And has that ever actually happened? She asked. Has anyone ever seen you all the way through? I thought about it, really thought. No, I said, I don't think I've ever let anyone get that far. She nodded. So you're protecting yourself from a danger you've never actually encountered, because you leave before anyone has the chance to either leave you or stay. I understood it, I could see it clearly, I just didn't know how to stop doing it. Understanding a thing and changing a thing are two entirely different muscles, and I had spent 30 years strengthening one and had almost no memory of the other. That was where I was when I walked into Fern Coffee on a Tuesday morning in November and had a perfectly ordinary cup of coffee next to a man who was going to change my life. There is nothing glamorous about how I met Marcus Webb. It was a Tuesday, it was November, the gray, unremarkable middle of it. I was at my usual table in the back of Fern, the one near the outlet, with a campaign deck open in front of me that was due by noon. My headphones were in, my coffee was hot. I had my jacket and my bag arranged on the chair across from me in the universal language of, I am using this space, please use another space. And then someone sat down in that chair, not the chair beside me, the chair directly across from me. He picked up my jacket and set it to the side with the mild, unbothered certainty of someone who has evaluated the situation and made a decision and is comfortable with it. I looked up, I was fully prepared to be politely firm. I forgot what I was going to say. He was tall, you could tell even sitting down, something in the geometry of him. He had warm, deep brown skin and natural hair that was exactly the right length, grown out past a shape into something more personal than a cut. He was wearing a paint-stained Morehouse College sweatshirt and carrying an old leather sketchbook swollen with use. And he had these eyes, dark, attentive, direct, that met mine and didn't look away, with the ease of someone who has never needed to avoid eye contact as a social grace. He said, every other seat in this place faces the window. Not as an apology, not as a question, just a clean piece of information offered in explanation. I looked around, he was right. I said, okay. He opened his sketchbook, I turned back to my laptop. We did not speak again for 43 minutes. When I started packing up to leave, he looked up. You work in advertising, he said. How did you know that? Your screen, the font hierarchy on the deck, the ratio of image blocks to copy, and you had the look of someone building something they need to persuade someone else with. A small pause. I'm a graphic designer, I read layouts the way some people read faces. Are you always this observant? I asked. I meant it to come out cooler than it did. He smiled, slow, deliberate, one corner of his mouth first, then the rest of his face like a sunrise that doesn't rush. Only about things worth paying attention to, he said. I stood there for 3 full seconds before I remembered I was a functional adult capable of normal responses. We introduced ourselves. He told me his name, Marcus Webb, a freelance illustrator and graphic designer, originally from DC, 2 years into Atlanta. I told him mine. He asked a follow-up question about my work that showed he had actually absorbed the answer instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. I gave him my number when I left, which surprised both of us. We texted for a week. The following Friday we had dinner at a Thai place in Ponce City Market, and I spent half the meal waiting in my practiced way to find the thing that was wrong with him. The red flag, the excuse. I didn't find one. I found someone who asked questions and actually paused to process the answers. Someone who had opinions and held them without aggression. Someone who told me 3 true things about himself: his relationship with his dad, a creative failure he was still working through, a habit he was trying to break, in the same casual, unbothered way he had sat down across from me at my table, as if being honest about oneself was simply what you did rather than something that required courage. He walked me to my car when dinner was over. He hugged me goodbye, a real hug, arms fully around me, and said, "I'd like to do this again." "Me too," I said. I meant it, which, on the drive home, scared me more than anything had scared me in a long time. Over the next 3 months, Marcus and I built something. Long dinners and longer phone calls, Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, a gallery opening where we stood in front of one large print for 20 minutes talking. His apartment, his cooking, his way of being in a room that made the room feel warmer without him doing anything obvious to make it so. He was easy to be with. That was the thing I kept trying to figure out, like it was a problem to be solved. How was this so easy? There were moments sitting on his couch while he sketched and I read, standing in his kitchen while he cooked and I talked about my week, where I forgot to perform. Where I was just Daniel, not the curated, arranged version, just the actual one. Those moments were simultaneously the best and most terrifying of my adult life. Because my walls noticed. My internal early warning system, honed over 31 years, registered what was happening. Someone is getting in, actually getting in, and started making noise. The noise started around month 3. I started doing what I always did. Not dramatically, not in ways I could easily be called on, just gradually pulling back, going quiet at the wrong moments, canceling plans once then twice with excuses that were technically true but not the real reason, picking at small things that had nothing to do with what was actually going on. Marcus, to his considerable credit, did not miss it. It came to a head on a Wednesday evening in late January. We'd had dinner at his apartment. He was washing dishes, I was at the kitchen island, scrolling my phone and giving one-word answers to whatever he was saying. He turned off the water, dried his hands, looked at me. "Daniel," he said, "where did you go?" "I'm here." "You're not. You've been somewhere else for about 2 weeks. I've been trying to figure out if it's something I did, something you're going through, or if you're building up to ending this." The directness knocked the air out of me. "I'm not trying to end this," I said. And the truth of it surprised me as I said it, that I wasn't, that I actually didn't want to, that the thought of not having this anymore felt like something contracting painfully in my chest. "Then talk to me," Marcus said, "just that, no edge in it, no urgency, just an open door." "I don't know how to do this," I finally said. "I don't know how to be in something real without waiting for it to go wrong, without waiting for you to see me, actually see me, and decide I'm not what you thought." Marcus looked at me for a moment. "What would it look like," he said carefully, "for you to let me see you, not the version you put out, the actual you?" I didn't have an answer. I went home without a resolution. He said goodbye at his door and held my eyes for a moment and said, "I'll be here," and let me go. "I'll be here." I turned that sentence over in my mind for the entire drive home. For 3 days after, I told Dr. Weston about it in our next session. "What does that bring up for you?" she asked. "Terror," I said immediately, "because what if he means it?" She raised an eyebrow. "What if he means it?" she repeated slowly. "Tell me more." "Because if he means it," I said, working it out as I talked, "then I have to actually show up. I have to actually be the thing he's staying for, and if I show him the real thing and the real thing isn't enough," I stopped. "Then you'll have real evidence," Dr. Weston said, "for what has until now only been a fear." Yes, exactly, the fear was safer than the evidence, because I couldn't prove it wrong, but I also couldn't be hurt by it yet. It was abstract. "What would you need," she said, "to be willing to risk the evidence?" I didn't answer that question in her office, but I carried it home with me. And it was still there, still quietly open, 2 weeks later on a Saturday afternoon in February when Marcus mentioned the ingrown hairs and I, without fully thinking it through, offered to help. It wasn't a planned, meaningful moment. I want to be honest about that because in retrospect it's easy to make it sound like I knew what was happening, like I looked at Marcus and thought, this is how I'm going to open up. It wasn't like that, it was ordinary. He mentioned the ingrown hairs on his chest and shoulders while we were eating lunch at his place. He'd been dealing with them for a few weeks, kept meaning to shave it down, couldn't quite reach everything on his own, felt weird about going to a salon for something so minor. And I said before I had thought it through, I can help if you want. He looked at me, yeah. Yeah, I said, it's not a big deal. Okay, he said, and he smiled. We finished lunch. He got a fresh razor and some shaving gel from under his sink and we went to the bathroom. He sat on the closed toilet lid, he pulled his shirt off and I stood behind him. And something happened in my chest that had nothing to do with the task. Not attraction, not exactly, not just that, something deeper, something about the particular quality of trust being offered. Marcus sitting in front of me with his back turned, shoulders relaxed, breathing even, his entire posture saying, I'm okay with you here, I trust you with this. I was aware of it in my hands before my head caught up. My hands registered the weight of it, the slight unsteadiness of being trusted in an immediate physical way. Okay, I said, my voice came out steadier than I expected. Tell me if I press too hard. I will, he said. I spread the gel slowly across his upper back and shoulders. It was cool and white and Marcus made a small surprised sound at the temperature, then settled. I picked up the razor. The first pass was careful. The only sound in the bathroom was the soft, deliberate whisper of the blade and the drip of water in the sink. Marcus sat still, not rigidly, just present, grounded in his own body in a way that I found oddly affecting. I worked slowly, more slowly than was strictly necessary, but I found as I moved through it that I didn't want to rush. That this, the attentiveness of it, the care required, the way I had to be fully present was doing something to me, was quieting something in me that was usually very loud. I found as we continued that I had never done anything quite like this before. I had been physically close to people, had been in relationships, had touched and been touched in all the ways that relationships involve. But this was different, more precisely vulnerable, not in the way of heat or desire but in the way of specific, deliberate care. I was responsible for not hurting him, for being attentive. For moving slowly enough to catch what needed catching and leaving untouched what needed to be left alone. There is a kind of intimacy that lives in that kind of careful, focused attention that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with being present. It is the intimacy of a doctor's hands or a parent's, the intimacy of, I am here, fully here with my whole attention, and what I am doing with that attention is taking care of you. I had spent so much of my life doing the opposite, not with my hands but in every other way. My real attention had been trained inward for 31 years, monitoring myself, managing impressions, calculating distance. What I had very rarely done was turn that attention fully outward, toward someone else with nothing held back, with no monitoring of how I appeared while I did it. And in those 20 minutes my full attention was on Marcus, on the line of his shoulder, on the way his breathing shifted when the gel was cool, on the compass rose tattooed on his right shoulder blade, detailed and precise, the work of a friend's hands that had cared about getting it right. I thought about hands that care about getting it right. You're quiet, Marcus said after a while. Concentrating, I said. You go quiet in different ways, he said. Some quiet means you're focused, some quiet means you're miles away. This one is different from both of those. I made another slow pass across his shoulder blade. What does this one mean? That's what I'm trying to figure out, he said. I moved to the back of his neck. The hair there was short and fine and I went very slowly. Marcus, I said, and my voice was doing something I wasn't fully in control of. Softer, more uncertain, less like the assembled version of me. Yes. Do you ever feel like there are parts of yourself that you've never shown anyone, not things you're ashamed of, just things that feel too raw, too real? He was quiet for a moment, then yes. How do you decide when to show them anyway? He thought about it. Marcus was never in a hurry with his answers. I don't decide it's safe, he said finally. I decide the person is worth the risk. That's different from safe. safe you can control, worth the risk. That's a judgment you make about the other person, not about the situation.
Yeah.
I stopped moving the razor. After a moment, I started again. We continued. He made a quiet joke about his compass rose tattoo and how it had hurt more than he expected, and he'd made sounds that were not dignified. I said I'd be careful around it. I was. And then somewhere around the 20-minute mark, something in me came apart. It wasn't a decision, that's the most honest thing I can say. It was more like holding something very heavy for a very long time and your arms give out. Not because you stopped trying, because there's a limit to how long arms can hold. I thought about the boy in Caleb's backyard looking at stars and feeling something too enormous to name. I thought about the parking lot at midnight, the two words said into the dark. I thought about Tasha's hand in mine at prom and the vast emptiness where feeling was supposed to be. I thought about every man I had pulled away from before they could get close enough to see me. Every moment of potential intimacy I had managed into nothing, quietly, efficiently, the way you manage a fire before it can spread. And I thought about Marcus, sitting still in front of me, not asking me to be anything other than what I was, not performing anything for me either, just here, just real, just worth the risk. The first tear tracked down my face and I didn't make a sound. The second one followed. My hands kept moving, the razor kept going, I was still careful, I was still attentive, but somewhere behind my eyes the whole carefully held landscape of myself was shifting. I thought I was quiet enough. I was wrong. Daniel. His voice was low and even, he hadn't moved, he was still sitting, facing away from me, hands quiet on his knees. I didn't answer, I made another pass with the razor, my hands were steady, my face was not. Hey, the pause, Daniel. Almost done, I said, the words came out wrong, too tight, too small, the voice of someone trying to hold something together from the outside. He heard it. I know he heard it because of what he did next. What he did instead of turning around. Instead of filling the space with words or reassurance or the kindly managed response of someone who has decided to be good about this. He reached back, one arm slowly reaching behind him into the space where I was standing, his palm turned up, open, offered. He held his hand out to me, in the air, behind him without looking. It was the most eloquent gesture I had ever witnessed in my life. It said, I know something is happening, I don't need to see it to respond to it. I'm not asking you to explain or justify or manage it, I'm just here, this is what here looks like, take it or don't, but it's here. I stared at his hand. The razor was still in my other hand. I was aware of the weight of it, aware of the cool of the bathroom, aware of the small drip of water in the sink that had been the soundtrack to the last 20 minutes. His hand didn't move, it just waited, open, patient, available. Every wall in me was shaking. I set the razor on the edge of the sink. And I took his hand. The moment my fingers closed around his, the moment his hand closed back, warm and firm and real, the last thing holding me together came completely undone. Not gently, not in the quiet, photogenic way of movie grief, in the way of something that has been compressed for decades suddenly having room. My whole body was in it. I sank down to sit on the edge of the bathtub, still holding his hand, and I came apart with the kind of crying that bypasses your face and happens somewhere foundational, somewhere structural. I cried for the parking lot at 21. I cried for every version of myself I had put away and told to be quiet and wait. I cried for 31 years of being so good at not being seen. I cried because someone had reached his hand back in the dark without needing to see what he was reaching toward, and something in me recognized that as the opposite of every fear I had ever had about being known, not conditional, not evaluated, not based on whether the real thing was enough. Just, I'm here, I'm reaching, take it. Marcus held on through all of it. He didn't turn around for a long time. He just held my hand, steady, his grip neither tight nor loose but present, while I came apart in his bathroom at close to midnight on a Saturday in February. When the worst of it had passed, when I had moved through the deep part into something quieter and more exhausted, he stood up, turned around and sat down on the floor. He sat cross-legged on the tile, still holding my hands in both of his, looking up at me. Hi, he said. Hi, my voice was wrecked. You want to talk about it? I thought about saying no, I thought about the dozen smaller, safer versions of the truth I could hand him. I thought about how good I was at giving people something that looked like openness while revealing almost nothing. I thought about his hand in the dark, open palm up. I've spent my whole life, I started, making sure nobody could see me. I know, he said quietly, no judgment, just acknowledgement. I'm so tired of it. The words came out with a rawness that surprised even me. I'm so tired of building things just to leave them before they can leave me. I'm so tired of performing. I pressed my fingers against my sternum. I don't even know what's under all of it anymore. I've been doing it for so long. Marcus listened. He didn't interject. He didn't reassure me prematurely. He held the space and let me fill it with real things, which was more than anyone had ever done, more than I had ever let anyone do. I talked for a long time about Georgia, about my father and those 6 months of silence, about Caleb in his backyard under the stars, about the parking lot at midnight, about every relationship I had dismantled before it could know me, about Dr. Weston's diagram and the question she'd asked that I'd never answered, what would you need to risk the evidence? When I had run out of things to say, we sat in the quiet of the bathroom, the water drip, the soft light. Can I tell you something? Marcus said. Yeah. I've been scared too. He held my eyes, not the same kind, but I've had my version of it. I had a father who was emotionally absent, not cruel, just not there, never saw me, not really. I spent years trying to earn that, trying to make myself visible enough to someone who simply wasn't capable of reading me. He paused. When that doesn't work, when you spend years pouring yourself towards someone who can't receive you, you learn a different kind of wall, not hiding yourself. Just stopping yourself from needing to be seen, deciding you don't need it, that it's not worth wanting. But you moved to Atlanta, I said. Partly because I was tired of not wanting things I did want, tired of performing a version of myself that didn't need anything. A small pause. I moved here and I figured out who I was pretty quickly, but I still didn't know how to let anyone in. And then a guy at a coffee shop looked at me like I had mildly inconvenienced him by being interesting, and I thought. What? I said. I thought, this person is going to matter to me before we'd even had a real conversation. Something about the way you looked up and then carefully went back to your work like you were deciding not to be interested. The corner of his mouth lifted. It was very compelling. We ended up on the couch around 1 in the morning. Talked until 2:30 when the words ran out and the quiet that was left felt good rather than uncomfortable. The quiet of two people who have said real things and are resting in the aftermath. I want to stay, I said quietly into the dark. Not just tonight, I mean in this, I want to stop waiting to leave. I know, Marcus said, I want you to stay too. I don't know how to promise that. I don't know how to promise I won't panic and pull back again. You probably will, he said, probably more than once. That's not the question is whether you come back. I thought about that. I'll come back, I said. I know, he said again, simply, like a fact that had already been established. I drove home in the early hours and sat in my car in the parking deck before going upstairs. I needed a moment to sit with what had happened, to let it be real before I moved. Something had changed, not everything, nothing so simple as everything, but something in the core architecture of myself had shifted. Some essential wall had come down or been opened up, and the air that came through the opening was cold and new, and I had no idea what it meant except that I was still breathing. And I was grateful for it. It has been 14 months since that night in Marcus's bathroom. 14 months since I set down a razor and took an offered hand and cried on a bathroom floor until I was empty. Marcus and I are still together. We still have separate apartments which we both like. There is something we each value about having a space that belongs entirely to ourselves. But my toothbrush has lived in his bathroom cabinet for 10 months. His custom coffee blend is always in my kitchen. We know each other's rhythms and moods and the particular shape of each other's silences, the ones that mean something and the ones that are just silence. It has not been easy. I'm going to say that clearly because one of the cruelties of stories with emotional breakthroughs is that they imply the breakthrough was the hard part and the rest is just joy. It's not. The breakthrough is the door. What happens after the door is the actual work. I still have days when the walls go up. When I go quiet in the wrong way and Marcus looks at me across the kitchen and says, gently, where are you? And I have to choose between the reflex and the truth. I still sometimes pick at small things when I'm afraid of something large. I still, on my worst days, feel the old pull toward distance, the instinct that says it's safer to leave before you're left. But I choose differently now. Not every time. I won't pretend I make the brave choice every time, but most times, more times than not, I stay, I speak, I come back. After the bathroom floor conversation, Marcus and I had a few sessions with a therapist together, not formal couples therapy, but a space to talk about what we each brought to this and what we each needed. It was uncomfortable, deeply so at first. I sat in that office and said things I had never said out loud about the patterns, about the fear, about the way I had learned to preemptively abandon things I loved. And Marcus sat beside me and said things he'd never said to me about his father, about learning not to need to be seen, about moving to Atlanta with the specific hope of becoming someone who could receive love instead of just offering it at a careful distance. We were more similar than we'd known. Our patterns were different, our wounds were different. But the essential shape of it, two people who had learned, each in their own way, that being fully known was dangerous. Two people who had gotten very good at moving through the world in ways that protected them from the risk of that. And who had somehow, in a coffee shop on a Tuesday in November, found each other anyway. I called my father on his birthday in March. We talked for 40 minutes. It was not a transformed relationship. We are still building, still finding our way through the decades of things unsaid. But he asked about my work and I told him about a campaign I was proud of and he said, "That sounds real good, Daniel." And somewhere toward the end he said, quietly, "I hope you're happy." I am, I told him, I really am. Naomi, who is 23 now, studying pre-med, still sends rainbow emojis on my anniversary with Marcus, asked me recently what I thought the most important thing about loving another person was. She asked it the way Naomi asks everything, without preamble and with genuine interest in the actual answer. I sat with it. That being seen is both the terrifying thing and the whole point, I finally said. You can have closeness without it, comfort, companionship, but not love, not real love. Real love requires showing someone the whole thing, the assembled version and the broken version underneath, especially the broken version. She was quiet for a moment, then, "That's going in my notes." "What notes?" "My document, Useful Truths, don't make it weird." I love my sister. Here is what I know now, at 31, that I did not know for most of my life. The armor does not protect you, it isolates you. Every wall I built to keep from being hurt also kept out everything I was trying to protect room for. Every performance I gave to prevent people from seeing me also prevented them from knowing me. And a life spent being strategically safe, carefully managed, always half a step toward the exit, is a life that never gets the thing it was trying to protect. Which is love, which is, in the end, the only thing that actually matters about being here. I was so afraid of being seen and found lacking that I never let anyone see me. And the cruelty of that is, I was lonely. Profoundly, specifically lonely, in the way you can only be lonely when you are surrounded by people and connection and warmth, but none of it can reach you, because you have built the structure of yourself too tight to let anything in. The bathroom floor changed that. Not all at once. Healing doesn't work like that. It works incrementally in small decisions, in moments where you choose the truth over the reflex, where you stay when you want to run, where you reach back for the hand in the dark. But the bathroom floor cracked something open. Let the air in. And everything that has grown since, the relationship, the honesty, the capacity I am slowly building to be known, grew through that crack. Man sat down across from me in a coffee shop because he needed a seat that faced away from the glare. He drew in his sketchbook and didn't apologize for existing in my space. He walked me to my car and said I'd like to do this again. And then over the next months he held every door open and waited with a patience I am still not sure I deserve, while I figured out in tears on a cold bathroom floor, holding a hand I hadn't been able to see what it meant to walk through. He held out his hand in the dark, open palm up. And I took it. And I am still, every day, imperfectly, gratefully, continuously choosing to stay. Outro for you. If you're watching this and you recognized yourself somewhere in this story, if you're the one who performs, who waits to leave, who has been building walls since before you had words for why, I want to say something directly to you. You are not broken for having walls. You built them because you needed them. They made sense. They were the right response to whatever made them necessary. You are not a defective version of a more functional person. You are a person who learned to protect themselves, and you learned it well. But there comes a moment, and maybe you're in it right now, or maybe it's coming, when the thing that protected you starts costing you more than the danger it protected you from. When the armor that kept you safe starts being the thing that keeps you alone. When the performance gets so exhausting that even the actor forgets what the real thing would feel like. That's the moment, that's when it's time. Not to tear the walls down all at once, that's not how this works, and anyone who tells you it is has never actually had walls. But to find a door. To find the person who is worth the risk, not the person who feels safe, because safe is what you control and you cannot control another person. The person worth the risk of being known by them. And when you find them, when they hold their hand out, take it. Even if your voice comes out wrong, even if you're on a bathroom floor, even if you are less composed and more real and more undone than you have ever let yourself be in front of another person. Take the hand. Because on the other side of that terrifying, necessary, wall-shattering moment is something I genuinely did not believe existed for me for a very long time. It's love, real love, the kind that knows you, the kind that holds on even when, especially when, what you're offering is the broken version. It is worth it, I promise you, with everything I have, it is so worth it. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for letting me put this out into the world. If something in this story landed for you, please tell me in the comments. I read every single one and they matter to me more than I can say. Share this with someone who might need it. You probably know at least one person who is standing at a wall and looking for a door. And if you're new here, welcome. This channel is exactly what it says: true stories, real people, real love in all its terrifying, imperfect, beautiful forms. Subscribe if you want to stay. I'll see you in the next one.